Hi everyone! Finally, the third video in the series discussing the thought of Italian philosopher and thinker, Julius Evola. In future videos we will explore the structures of time and space according to Evola, his politics and the notion of imperium, and so forth. With this one, Apollo's arrow brings you the conclusion of the first chapter in this series. So, if you want more like this content, please like, subscribe, comment and click the notification bell so this channel can grow and deliver more content. Also, follow us on our social media platforms. Stay strong and upright. May the light be with you. Reaching the supernatural knowledge of tradition constitutes the fundamental difference in the thought of the two greatest traditionalists, Evola and Guénon. According to Guénon, the first principles of tradition were transmitted through an intellectual elite which in the traditional Eastern civilization is represented by the Brahmanic caste. The main characteristic of this caste, in contrast to the others, is the knowledge of principles from above directly through what Guénon calls intellectual intuition. Social organization is structured around this intellectual elite that permeates and conveys the power of principles from above in this case. Intellectual intuition is a suprarational faculty and immediate still more than sensory intuition because beyond the distinction of subject and object which the latter preserves, intellectual intuition is both the means of knowledge and knowledge itself, and in it, subject and object are unified and identified. Through intellectual intuition the subject becomes the object, the distinguishing dualism between them is suspended and the recognition of metaphysical principles takes place in the form of a metaphysical realization, understood as the identity of knowing and being which is not only affirmed but realized. For Evola, knowledge through intellectual intuition is one of the paths to metaphysical knowledge. Alongside it, and opposite to Guénon, who had a lower appreciation for action, he thinks that action is also a way of reaching the forces of tradition. If in the case of Guénon we see that contemplation wins the primacy in the contemplation-action confrontation, we understand that we are dealing with a detachment from the world and placing ourselves in the conditions of an inactive contemplation in order to achieve harmony with the One. Therefore, only a subtle activity of contemplation. Evola, on the other hand, appreciates the free construction and emancipation of the highest forms of being in their approach to the absolute. Evola establishes the superiority of being over knowledge. This is understood as capturing the process of knowing as a form of changing one's being, in which one can be conditioned by the other, by what is external to oneself, or take control of the process, create reality and thus liberate itself in knowledge, in a priori in being, from material appearance. Evola requires an active affirmation of the spiritual powers to bring about a realizational transcendence, unlike Guénon who places the soul in a quiet state of meditation on the absolute. He sees the forces of tradition as the possibility of man to transcend the human. It is now necessary to clarify some differences between tradition and other usages or categories used in the traditional sense. Tradition is not religion. Religion may have its own inner doctrinal essence or its principles and functions in a higher direction, but it will always be simply an expression of tradition, a more or less pure form of it. Tradition is not faith, it is actualization. And the actualization of its forces always happens with the will and desire of man to be realized in all the potentials of his being by going up. Tradition is affirmative, while often religion has a passive nature, contemplative in cases such as Hindu and submissive in the case of Abrahamic religions. The immanent transcendent nature of tradition distinguishes it from most religions that isolate man on the plane of the world by placing him on the edge of a metaphysical abyss called the afterlife. Tradition is distinguished from philosophia perennis. The term philosophia perennis was coined by Leibniz. Its most useful meaning is the one based on the belief that all religions and philosophies are expressions of a universal philosophy, now lost to humanity. Aldous Huxley's formulation is the one that comes closest to the concept of tradition. Philosophia perennis, the expression is articulated by Leibniz, but the thing is universal and timeless. It is a metaphysics that recognizes an intersubstantial divine reality to the world of things, lives, and minds. It is a psychology that discovers in the spirit, anima, something similar to the divine reality, even identical with it. It is an ethics that assigns to man as the ultimate goal the knowledge of the immanent and transcendent foundations of all that is. Likewise, Frithjof Schumann's formulation of perennial philosophy is the totality of primordial and universal truths. For Guénon and Evola, tradition is not a philosophy, but the eternal truth, expressed in philosophies, religions, politics, etc. As we said above, tradition is a metaphysical reality existing and accessible to man, as well as realized through the circulation of its ordering force from above. This force gives shape and active being to human realities, meaning by this a well-defined form that always goes upward. Philosophia perennis as a conception is closer to the concept of primordial tradition in the prehistoric sense and less to a transcendent metaphysical reality independent of the appearance or loss of truths by man. Despite the universal formulation of permanent philosophy, for Guénon, philosophy will always be the love of knowledge and therefore, the condition and the first step towards knowledge, which clarifies its limits by itself. For Evola, philosophy isolated from the metaphysical category of tradition is at best a speculative exercise of no value. And finally, a difference entirely on the practical political level. Counter-revolutionary traditionalism and traditional politics according to Evola. Counter-revolutionary traditionalism is a movement that came about as a reaction to the historical events caused by the French Revolution. The main thinkers of this trend are counter-revolutionaries such as de Maistre, Edmund Burke, Louis de Bonald, Robert de Lamennais, Donoso Cortés, who put the initiative of their theories on their affiliation and political convictions, such as on the French monarchical tradition. The tradition of monarchy does not mean that we are dealing with a monarchy of tradition or traditional in the Evolian sense. The mistake, according to Evola, is that their effort is reduced to a desperate call to return to previous forms of state, society, governance, and faith. The strong emphasis on the Catholic tradition distinguishes these 19th century thinkers from Evola, as we will see. The content of traditionalism consists of routines, customs, survivals of what once was, without a true recognition of the spiritual world and of what in it is not merely factual but has a value of a permanent character. So we are dealing with the tendency of a preservation of forms of life, institutions, and structures already without any higher content. Evola insists on loyalty to the principles of tradition and standing by them through the inner form. This distinguishes the man of tradition in bright and dark times. Tradition has no history, and history is the field of collision and unfolding of the forces of tradition and dissolution. Traditionalists of the 19th century considered the historical tradition of an institution, while Evola places himself in the meta-history of the immutable principles of tradition among the ruins of history. Here we come to the conclusion of this first chapter dedicated to the thought of Julius Evola. If you enjoyed this video, please see the other two before this one and don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and click the bell. See you next time. May the light be with you.